Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John, and it's time for a review of Scaled and Icy, the latest album by the alternative music duo 21 Pilots. This is on the heels of an immaculate 3-album run that you just don't often see, not to this degree. You had Vessel, which was an amazing start to their mainstream career, if you will. You saw Blurryface and them conquering the world, and then arguably their magnum opus, my favorite album they ever did in 2018, Trench. Start to back, every single song, the story or not, the songs, the crafting, the production on that record is insane. I still go back to Trench all the time. In fact, 21 Pilots, one of my favorite musical acts to come out of the 2010s, that was just the cherry on top of an amazing decade for them. I was interested to see how they would follow it up because they put out Level of Concern during the pandemic in 2020. It was a one-off. It talked about the heightened sense of anxiety we were all feeling, but it definitely was a pop bop. It seems like they were leaning into that creativity, and during that time, Tyler Joseph stated that there were two very different albums that 21 Pilots could make, and instead of the other, they went with Scaled and Icy, which is definitely on the poppier side of the fence, but it's also kind of all over the place, a colorful mess. The tug-of-war approach to crafting this album is definitely a unique take for them. They're thinking outside of the confines of 21 Pilots. In fact, a lot of these songs, if you hit play, you wouldn't immediately say, yeah, that's 21 Pilots, that's absolutely them. It feels a bit like somebody else, and at times that can feel fresh, but it can also feel like they're chasing the heels of other things, like 80s music, like pop music, and even some 90s hip-hop. I mean, you've got a producer that's worked with the likes of 50 Cent and Eminem, and also the protege of Dr. Dre. It's interesting how we go from that to Paul Meany, to people who worked on Blurryface and everything in between. You've even got his dad singing backup vocals. How much you enjoy this record is probably going to depend on how much you like them thinking outside of the box, coloring outside of the lines. To me, I can appreciate the ideas on paper, but the execution, it often pales in comparison to what I know they're capable of, and this applies to production, to lyrics, and the overall way that Tyler tells a story. It's clear that he was impacted, obviously, by becoming a father, by some of the world events, but it's also a bit not so on the nose, but also just kind of off in left field. I feel like we're gazing off into space half the time, and these songs don't seem to have a direct meaning, and a lot of the stuff with T.O.P. that connected with me in the past, it's the story, it's the emotion, it's the way that these songs suck you into their universe, and this album does not have that hook. Think about it in a video game context. If their last album, Trench, was the main storyline driving everything forward, the plot, the character development, this album, Scaled and Icy, is the subplot, the side mission. You do it, you take all the time to complete it, and then you get done and you're like, well, there wasn't really much reward for that. I don't want to sit here and just needlessly compare two albums that were very clearly meant to be a departure from each other stylistically, but I can't help but feeling like Trench was this album. It had the blueprint, it had the maps, it had the answers, it knew what it wanted to be, and Scaled and Icy is just confused, lost in space, floating around. Tyler Joseph himself said in an interview with Zane Lowe that the first and the last song are really what he knew had to be the first and the last, but everything in between could be shuffled, and that obviously is felt in the track listing. There's very little flow, there's very little rhyme or reason, and it just feels haphazard. The tracks really stack up, and they don't have a flow in and out of each other. They could just be shuffled around and moved out, and it wouldn't really matter. Shy Away came out as the lead single, and honestly, I still love that song. It's extremely fun, it's lively, it kind of talks about his songwriting process. He started off as making an instructional thing for his brother. It turned into Shy Away. It was the lead single from the album, and it charted pretty well. It's doing great on the alternative charts, and I can see why people latched onto it. It's different for T.O.P., it's poppier, but it also has guitar. Tyler Joseph taught himself how to play the electric guitar, so there is, for the first time, electric guitar all throughout a T.O.P. album. I just wish it was utilized in different ways. You can't help but feel torn while listening to some of these songs, like Formidable, for example, that does make use of the guitar. Tyler starts with the most predictable 80s sounding chord progression ever, and what made T.O.P. stand out and the S tier in the past is the fact that they always blazed their own trail. This album and songs like Formidable, as enjoyable at surface level as they might be, they always pale in comparison. To follow up Shy Away, they put out Choker, a song that I feel is almost bordering on parody of what someone would think 21 Pilots sounds like. It even has that little rap at the end that some people felt called back to like the self-titled era, songs like Taxi Cab. And the thing that's actually missing there, the key element, it's heart. The song doesn't feel like it has a genuine heart. It says things, but I don't feel conviction behind any of those words, the things that he's trying to say. Things got even worse by the time Saturday dropped. It was the third single, and it's honestly one of their worst songs, at least from their modern era. The lyrics on this one are asinine, inconsequential. It feels like it could have been written by anybody, and that is an overarching problem with Scaled and Icy, but it doesn't stand out more evidently than on Saturday. It was co-produced by Greg Kurstin. It does have a big top 40 feeling to it, but the lyrics are just so generic and washed out, and I know what people are going to say. Oh, they're being controlled by DEMA. I don't want to hear it. That's a cop-out. Falling further down the rabbit hole of Scaled and Icy, we see 21 Pilots kind of taking a stab at some 90s darker hip-hop leaning elements with the production, with Tyler Joseph and the way that he tries to line up his rhyme schemes. It's honestly a bit cringy the way that they try to meld worlds, and I can see the criticisms that people have called out in the past that I didn't really agree with then. Now I'm seeing it and I'm like, it's a bit too evident on their sleeve. Unfortunately, I'm talking about two songs that do have a lot of potential. That would be The Outside, track 4, and then track 10, No Chances. Both of these do have good production. I enjoy the kind of dark synths, and I appreciate, especially on No Chances, the way that Tyler lines everything up, but his flow kind of falls off by the time that the chorus rolls around. And if your song is crumbling there, you know you've got a problem. I mean, what was the twang on that one? Mulberry Street definitely left me kind of scratching my head because it does feel like 21 Pilots, but again, the soul is missing. However, instead of just closing out on some negativity, I want to highlight a couple of the songs that I actually feel kind of saved this album. It gave me a few to come away with this and say at least it wasn't a total loss. The first of those is unsurprisingly the opening track, Good Day. This song has a lot of momentum. It also has a surprising amount of peppiness to it for such a dark song lyrically. Tyler Joseph is talking about what would happen, how would I feel if maybe my bandmate Josh was suing me and then also my wife and my child died. What would I do? How would I fake myself out to continue living? Putting aside everything else we experienced on this record, from the really satisfying moment of closure, redecorating at the end, to something like Bounce Man that is just a facepalm manifested come to life, we have my favorite song and what I feel is genuinely the best song on the entire record, Never Take It. This song never quits. It's got a really fascinating chord structure to it. I think the song builds so nicely. The pre-chorus, the overall hook of the song. Tyler Joseph is fantastic. He's on fire vocally. The song is so charismatic and engaging. How could you not fall in love? The lyrics have a full throttle sense of momentum to them. Like, I'm not going to take no for an answer. You're not going to underestimate me, or us, that is. It's a song that definitely makes you feel alive in a sense, as does Shy Away, and for that reason, I think they're the two best. You can probably already tell, though, this is just me trying to put a layer of icing on top of kind of a stale cardboard box. This album is uninteresting in many ways. The lyrics are not all that detailed. I think that it suffers because of some of the songwriting choices, because of a lot of the lyrics that are used, especially on songs like The Outside, the whole vibe thing, and Take a Hit. It feels very not TOP, and you can circle back and say that they're being controlled or whatever you want to believe, but the truth is what's in front of us, and I don't feel that Scaled and Icy is a strong effort. It's definitely not standing anywhere close to their previous 3, and this album for me is getting a light 2.5 out of 5. Now that's what I call unfortunate. I would love to know what you guys are thinking about Scaled and Icy, I guess the 6th album, what I would consider the 5th by 21 Pilots. Leave your thoughts on the comment section down below. Keep in mind this is just my opinion. If you want to check out more of my TOP content, then tap these cards on screen now. Subscribe for the love of music, hit that like button, and I'll be back soon for more on ARTV.